halfway through shooting, we came against some really hard obstacles. A lot of stuff became much more difficult than we would have guessed, and so we had to kind of reimagine a lot of pieces of what we'd already shot to fit it into this new model. And New Orleans was the savior of that obstacle, because everything that we couldn't fix in problems we had created ourselves, we solved those problems with the city of New Orleans.
Oh, that's fascinating. Could you give us an example?
Well, there were like heavy chunks of episode 3 and 4 that we hadn't shot by the time my co-director left town in October, and we were struggling to figure out how we were going to shoot them. They were kind of larger crowd scenes, and after we took like a sort of two-month hiatus, we regrouped and looked at what we had and found a way to rearrange scenes in the narrative into different episodes, and to like be able to work through Lark's narrative with her experiences throughout the city and her movements throughout the city, to use the city to its effect as her safe place outside of these dark night rooms.
Interesting, very interesting. One of the other things that I noticed, and that I think is also uncommon, is there are many the sound of the series. There are many scenes where what you're hearing is just sort of city background noise. There's that first contact dancing scene where it's essentially silent. There's no music. It's just the sound of the people sort of touching each other and hitting the floor, and it's very powerful. How did you arrive at the decision to do it that way?
Well, I mean, the dance studio is supposed to be this safest haven of the show's locations, you know what I mean? And I really wish we had gotten a lot more shot in that studio, but I think we used what we had to nice effect. And I think we always knew that one of the strongest pieces of the series would be beginning with this silent dancing in the studio. And, you know, anyone who's been in a dance studio knows that there exists this kind of silent magic. And those sounds of people's feet scraping the floor and things like that are, you know, they are the soundtrack to that kind of holistic collaboration that improvised dance can create. But yeah.
Did you know Lexi? You knew Lexi Schaefer before the shooting started, you said, or was this an audition?
It was not an audition. I did know her. I didn't know her that well. She was a friend of a friend's, and I had met her in maybe 2008 or 9. She and some friends were living in Boston while she was in college. And then when I was moving to LA, my friend Gene, who knew Lexi, told me, oh, when you get to LA, you got to look up Lexi. So I did, and I told her about the story, and within the day, she was like, I have to play this character. I must play this character. So we stayed in touch for the next several months while I was writing the scripts. We were working on outlines, and Dylan and I spent all those months doing like Skype video sessions and talking out all the issues we had. But yeah, I got to know her much better through the process.
She was phenomenal.
Yeah, thank you. I'll pass that along to her. She should say thank you.
Now, as the writer, director, and producer all on a single series, that to me sounds exhausting, but I'm not a very organized person. What was it like doing all three of that at the same time?
I was actually just talking about this with Dylan, who is the co-director, and it was a lot of different things at once. I mean, the upside to it, and I'll start out with that because there's so much more downside, to be honest, but the upside to it is that, you know, people let me try to see a vision through, you know? Dylan is a filmmaker in his own right, and really an auteur one at that, and it was kind of incredible that he sacrificed so much of his potential creativity in the process to help see my vision through. So that, but in a lot of ways, I ended up feeling like a mediator between everyone, because I was not organized enough myself, and I found myself constantly apologizing to people, but also happy to take the blame in any situation that went awry because I was the only one who anyone was going to blame, so I had to. Um,
Right.
and many things went awry. But writing it, there was some, I mean, like, there was some pressure on writing it within time, but the writing process was a really fun one. I spent most of the time I was writing the script, writing it in the middle of the night in New Orleans without a home while I was squatting in a friend's apartment who had moved out before new people were moving in. So it was this kind of like high pressure scenario that was actually kind of fun and helpful for the story at the time. But then producing it was a task I was highly unprepared for, and made just easy, foolish mistakes in the writing that would have that had I not made them would have saved my life as a producer. But I just didn't think of it that way. It's something I'd never done before. For example, like I would write a scene where a random character would show up and have 3 lines or something like that, and then as a producer, 3 weeks later, I'm like, oh shit, I have to cast this person who's gonna say these 3 lines. You know what I mean? Like, it's just little things you forget about while you're writing when you want to write the best scene, and you're not thinking about your future self who's going to have to make that scene into a reality
Right.
in many different ways. Directing, it was a real shared responsibility. There were days where I was taking the helm. There were days when Dylan was taking the helm. There was days when Jack, who was our DP from Flatlands, was taking the helm. So um, it was a highly collaborative process. All the while, everybody knew that this was very much my virginal experience in the world. So, uh, and luckily they were all close friends. So, they
That
cut me a
helps.
little slack.
Yeah.